Good evening, everyone. It is 7 p.m., October 10th, 2024, and I'd like to welcome everyone in the room and those who are participating online as I call to order this meeting of the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek Board of Education for the purpose of conducting the school district's business. We value everyone's input and have made sure to dedicate a portion of this meeting to hear from you. We look forward to your comments during that time as it's indicated on our agenda. Mr. Liming, please kick us off with the roll.
Mrs. Anderson?
Here.
Mrs. Dorn?
Here.
Mr. Kinsey?
Present.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Dr. Pryor?
Present.
All right, we have a quorum. If you're able, will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which Thank you. Mr. Lyman with the Treasurer's Report.
Could I get a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of September 12th?
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Dorn and then Mrs. Anderson. Questions, corrections, comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Dr. Pryor?
Yes.
Could I get a motion to approve the minutes from the meetings of September 18th, 23rd, 24th, and October 2nd?
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Dorn and then Mrs. Anderson. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Dorn?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Abstain. I wasn't here.
Dr. Pryor?
Yes.
And Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Could I get a motion to approve the Treasurer's Report for the month of September?
So moved. Second.
Dr. Pryor and then Mrs. Anderson.
Okay, the couple comments, and then I don't really have much to report on finances themselves at this meeting, but our audit begins September 21st, so about 11 days away, I guess. The BHM CPA group will be doing the private audit. They're from Piketon. It's about $22,000 or something like that that it costs for that audit. They spend about a week on site and do the rest of it remotely normally. I also wanted to mention, because there are a few things that we have to do this year that we normally don't, as in the Treasurer's Office. One is there's required fraud training for all employees, and we have, when they're done with that training, it's I think it's like a 10-minute, isn't it a 10-minute video you watch or listen to? I can't remember what it is. And once you've completed that, then we get the certificate in our office, and we're audited as to whether or not we have all those when they come. So got to get everybody, we have to make sure everyone does that. We had science of reading training for all the teachers and administrators. I mean teachers, I guess, were the ones that receive a stipend for taking that. We have 169 teachers, and when we reimbursed those that had taken the training so far on September 20th, we reimbursed them. We had about 60 teachers out of the 169, so we're about a third of the way. They have, I think, the whole year, I believe, to get that done. Yes.
Till next summer, yeah.
Okay.
School year.
Yeah, June of 2025.
I did want to say, although this is on the agenda later, but just since I have the floor, I want to thank everyone that participated in the process of selecting a new treasurer, and that went really well, I felt, and happy with the results and all that, so we'll address that in a little bit. And then the financial reports themselves are included with your agenda, and they're on the website. Didn't really have anything to report about them. No big interesting things happened this month. So are there any questions about anything you saw on the financial reports? Or anything I mentioned?
Not hearing any. Tonight's Treasurer Report was moved by Dr. Pryor and seconded by Mrs. Anderson. Please call the roll.
Mr. Kinsey?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Dr. Pryor?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn?
Yes.
And the last one I have, could I get a motion to approve a then and now certificate for $4,289.56 to Scholastic Classroom Magazines, PO 4251019.
Move.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Dorn, seconded by Dr. Pryor.
And as I always say, that's just for a situation where we had an invoice dated ahead of the purchase order or some mistake in the process. So as long as I sign as treasurer saying we did have the money, then we're good for the audit.
Questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Dr. Pryor?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anything else, sir?
Nope.
All right, thank you very much. Moving into correspondence, did anybody receive anything for the good of the board, especially something that we all might not have seen?
Don't think I got any.
All right, then we will move into reports to the board. It's number 5 on our agenda, and we would like to welcome Ms. Betsy Gann, our Director of Curriculum. Thank you for taking the time to be here and to talk to us.
An honor for sure. The topic is exciting.
Yes, it is.
I have handouts of what you already have, PDFs of the presentation in case you want to make notes. Slideshow handout.
Again, it's always exciting to be designated as the one to deliver this great news publicly at the board meeting, so I do appreciate that opportunity. As you know, we're going to talk about the 2024 district report card. It has been released, and we are celebrating another great year, which we knew we had, but it's awful nice to see the metrics that get reported publicly, and the state acknowledges all the hard work done by teachers and the entire staff and community. So some of the highlights include that most of our students continue to make above expected growth. And as you know, we have different metrics, as I mentioned earlier, not just the percentage of students that score high or pass the test, but the students that make growth. So they are showing more than a year's worth of growth in a year's worth of time of instruction in the classroom. Another highlight includes the performance of special populations. Those continue to improve. We look at one of our categories called gap closing, and that includes special populations, minority groups, other demographics, and kind of drills down to make sure that we're uncovering any issues that may potentially be going on there with different groups of students. That performance area continues to improve even compared to last year. And overall achievement remains very, very high. And another thing we've been watching really closely is writing subscores. We knew years ago that our writing scores just weren't really highlighting the talent that we know our students have in writing. And they're asked to do quite a bit to write for an extended period of time, especially typing on the computer, which presents issues with younger kids, as you can imagine. So we started monitoring subscores. So how are kids doing in particular areas of writing? And looking at those top level points and noticing back then that, gosh, there aren't as many kids there as we would expect compared to classroom performance. So we look at those particular subscores, and in 21 out of 36 different possible subscores in all the writing prompts given last spring, we had more students scoring in that maximum point range, which might be 4 points in some areas or 2 points in another. And that number is up compared to last year. And we know that all students can achieve growth. Achievement sometimes is very, very difficult. Depends on what your background knowledge is, etc. So trying to hit that bar is important. Of course, we want students to be on grade level, but we also know that 100% of our students can move forward. And so I just like to include that because we do focus quite a bit on growth for all students. So this is a summary of the overall rating. As you know, we are a 5-star district, and we scored a 5 in all these categories here, with one exception I'll talk about here in a second. But our overall rating looks at all the different building categories. Not all buildings are rated in every single area, which makes sense. For example, graduation, that's only measured at the high school. But achievement, we don't have state tests at Stephen Bell. Those begin at Bell Creek. So there is not a component for Stephen Bell's report card in the area of achievement. So I'm going to walk through those building ratings to give you an idea of what fed into this to lead to that 5-star overall rating, which we're really, really proud of course. We'll talk about graduation in a moment. So those big factors, in addition to what I just explained, we're rated now, as you know, compared to the old ABCDF rating system. Now we have stars rated 1 through 5 stars in half-star increments. But we have these particular components: achievement, so that's just passage rate, how many students pass the test. Progress has been known as value added or growth. Gap closing, I already mentioned, that's where we look at specific groups of students to close the gap, so to speak. Early literacy, we hear a lot about the 3rd grade reading guarantee, which really is not just about 3rd grade. In fact, it's K through 5 now. We're not exactly sure how things might be reported next year, but we do have responsibilities under the 3rd grade guarantee legislation to continue to monitor the same kinds of reading skill success in kindergarten through 5th grade now, not just through 3rd grade. And then graduation, we're familiar with that component. And then the one that's still reported but not yet rated in terms of star is college, career, workforce, military readiness. That information is available on the ODEW website, showing all those statistics about our graduates here in Bellbrook, how they prepare for those different areas of life. This is a little more detail about achievement, how our students are scoring on those state tests that are given at the different grade levels. And I think this graphic is important, the circle graph and then the bar over here. You can see the different colors. And if I could bring your attention to the yellow area, that portion of the circle represents the percentage of our students that scored proficient. So they are passing. And then we move into the orange, which is accomplished. And that's a pretty significant chunk of the pie also. In fact, it's larger than those that scored proficient. And then we also have advanced, so very high scores. A large chunk of students, 34.4% of our kids are scoring in that advanced area on the test. And then that darker green, advanced plus. It's a smaller piece of that pie or that circle, the 4.7%. But if you think about that like extra credit in a classroom, for our students who are accelerated, and in our case it would just be in mathematics, kids will take that above grade level test. So if I have a 5th grade student and they're taking Math 6 and they score in the advanced range, then we get extra credit, so to speak, on this report. So that's a substantial chunk of students. And all of those weighted grades, so to speak, proficient giving us 1 point, the accomplished giving us 1.2, and then 1.4 and 1.6 credit, so to speak, gives us these particular numbers that all feed into the star rating. Overall.
Math or reading?
No, it's overall. That takes math, English language arts, the limited number of science tests that kids take throughout K-12, and combines all the tests together. And that's just another graphic. Okay. So, like I mentioned earlier, not every school is rated in every single area of the report card, but they do have their own personal overall rating. So we'll start with Stephen Bell with the youngest learners. And this particular report card, gap closing is highlighted. That is the area that feeds that star rating. Within gap closing, there are two things that the state looks at. Data from Stephen Bell on chronic absenteeism and gifted services and identification. Those are the two areas. Gifted because under gap closing, they are considered a subgroup. We do serve a lot of students at Stephen Bell. The only way to move those stars is to start serving in kindergarten, and we've tossed around how those kinds of things look, and that's just not a direction that we have felt we wanted to go. The other area where you earn more points in that gifted gap closing is to identify more students from diverse backgrounds, so minorities, et cetera. And there's only so many students to choose from. We do test all students in grade 1. We test all kindergartners in reading and math, all first graders in reading and math, and then begin service in second grade. And there's really not much else we can do with our particular student population pool to increase the number of students who are identified. And at Bell Creek, this is their report card. You start to see a whole lot more areas that are being monitored because state testing starts there in third grade, beginning in the fall. Our third graders are getting ready to take their first state achievement test here in a couple of weeks. So achievement, these highlighted areas are all the ones that are measured. Achievement, students passing tests, again, progress is growth. Gap closing, I've explained those particular factors, reducing educational gaps for different student groups, and then early literacy. So this is where that third grade guarantee, students receiving intervention in reading and then moving off of intervention plans as a result of that, et cetera. That's where that is measured. I do want to note here that the overall rating is up. We are very, very proud of the work that was done at Bell Creek. It takes several years to get things moving in that direction, as we know, and progress was one of those areas that really moved forward. That student growth, so again, recognizing that particular staff and leadership and all of the hard work that went into that. So I have no doubt that that momentum will continue. So we're really excited for that staff to celebrate 4.5 stars. And at the middle school, you can see we're not measuring early literacy. We've moved into those middle school years, so we just have these three areas that factor into the school report card: achievement, progress, and gap closing. So fine job there with 5 stars in each of those categories. Excellent performance. And at the high school, overall rating is a 5 there, and you can see we have achievement, progress, gap closing, graduation. No early literacy, and then again, the college and career readiness area is not rated. There's just data available. If you want to go online, you can click that, and it's very interactive. It provides you with all kinds of information about our students and what their plans are post-high school. So one thing I will say about graduation, because that one does tend to surprise us. We have a high graduation rate here. However, I do want to point out that students do have a choice. If they are receiving special education services, they can meet all their graduation requirements and be prepared to move on. But they do have a choice, if they are receiving the special education services, to go ahead and stay longer and pick up additional skills, whether that be through a career center program or staying in the high school. That is their option legally, and we of course welcome them and work with them on whatever skills and goals that they have. Those students, however, that choose to stay do not count toward graduation rate. So that is one thing that, as we went through our data, we noticed impacted that graduation rate. It's just something we have to live with to provide good service to all students. So again, going back to that concept of growth, that is one of our number one goals. We know with a demographic like ours in this district that achievement area is certainly important, but progress or value added is a really, really difficult thing to move the needle on when you have kids achieving at such high rates. So if we look at this chart, it just shows us that we want all students to be here, high growth rate and high achievement or high proficiency level, but we also know that when students struggle, we can still show growth. So when we analyze other kinds of data in data team meetings, we're always looking at, are all students on that right side really making the growth? And we'll talk about achievement also, but growth is certainly very important.
Betsy,
Yes.
how do the students who elect to go to the Career Center impact our data? Or do they show up on the Career Center's data, or I know they graduate from
Right.
our school, but how does that play in?
The results for state tests factor into our report card.
Okay. And as well as their graduation rate, I assume, as well. Okay.
Yeah, they graduate from
From
the
Bellbrook.
high school. They get a certificate of completion, a completer certificate at the Career Center. But they graduate from our.
So even though we give them up for 2 years, and
Right.
how well they do on testing still shows up on our. On
Yes.
Okay.
This I thought was interesting. We like to talk about comparable districts, and sometimes when we think about districts like ours, we think about, who's like us in the Dayton area, and we see different rankings in the paper, et cetera. But I like to point out that the state of Ohio looks at a whole lot of factors. They look at districts all across the state to find our comparable districts. And these are the 20 districts in our, quote, comparable district group, based on all kinds of things, income, education level of the population, and there's all kinds of information about that on the website if you want to dig into it. But I looked at this to see how many of those 20 received similar star ratings as Bellbrook, and I've highlighted those. So we have Bellbrook with 5 stars in those 3 areas that they looked at on this chart. And then 4 others that got 5 stars in all 3 categories. So I thought that was certainly an excellent showing for us. Out of the 20, only 5 received 5 stars in all 3 categories, and we are one of them. Yes, thank you very much. The only one in Dayton. Okay, so gap closing I talked about, and I do have a hyperlink on your PDF version of the presentation. So this shows how they measure it, and I could spend an entire evening really going into just this, but I just wanted to give you this high-level overview. There are annual goals set forth by federal legislation, Every Student Succeeds Act, and they say each and every year we want the percentage of students doing well to increase. They put forth this moving target, so to speak. So with the goal, of course, whenever, that all students would be meeting the bar. So those are the possible points and the different measures that show up for federal gap closing metrics. And we are up in this area, the annual English language arts growth progress, compared to last year. So just some of the things that they look at. The absenteeism, our English learners are meeting the goal, and then I've already hit on the gifted performance indicator. They're treating gifted as a subgroup like the others. Progress or value added, doing quite well there. Students are growing. Performance index, how well are they doing? Are we getting those added bonus points, so to speak, that extra credit I talked about with the circle graph, doing well there. But identification and services, there's a lot of weight on some areas that we just can't really impact. Identification of the very, very young, serving the very, very young, identification of minority groups, and serving substantial proportions of minority groups. There are things going on at the state to change this indicator to make it more equitable for different demographics around the state, but we don't have any change on that yet.
Something that really jumps out at me, you see in the news, and I get everybody across the country, different districts are different. I can't believe everything you read in the news, but I know there's a lot of trouble with chronic absenteeism.
Yes,
and that obviously
absolutely.
is a problem that we don't have here. That's amazing.
Yes, I agree. Yes, the principals work hard on that. They follow up. There are reports that they have to generate. There's a lot of parent engagement at very early stages, you know, to kind of catch those things early. So
That's great.
it's a lot of work, but it's paying off.
Go ahead.
So the minorities that are identified, does that include military families? Because I know sometimes we are, sometimes we don't. No, okay.
Not considered a subgroup on the state report card.
Okay, interesting, interesting.
So continuous improvement, always, you know, keeping the foot on the gas, so to speak, and hoping that we aren't going backwards. We were talking earlier, it's a lot of pressure when you earn that 5 stars. We want to maintain that, but we know that it's not revealing everything that's going on that's high quality for kids, certainly. So the systems that support collaboration and continued improvement, we are continuing with MAP assessments that measure growth over time. Those reports seem to line up really, really well with what the state puts out for us in terms of student growth. So those are good predictors for us. They help us spot areas where student groups need intervention, et cetera. And lots of great feedback is going back to students on how much they are growing over time by reviewing those MAP reports with them at the individual level. We're using short cycle checks for student mastery using historical test items. So the state test questions have been released, and there are great tools available to teachers now where they can have kids practice a certain type of writing that may show up on a state test, or a certain type of math problem using the technology to interact with a graph, for example. So they can actually use the exact same software and testing portal that the kids use for state testing. So those kinds of practice related to the classroom instruction, not isolated, but connected to what they're doing, certainly helps kids, I think, prepare, and helps us as teachers understand and navigate that system. So we're using those. Teachers have really good plans on how they're integrating those checks into their classroom. We have a new English language arts curriculum that you're aware of, and the movement to science of reading with the legislation is certainly supportive of best practice and evidence-based practices in our classroom. Not that that's a piece of cake to integrate a brand new curriculum. We know it's a challenge, but they are high quality materials, and we would expect students to benefit from them, certainly. Collaborative time is built into staff development schedules. On Monday, we have our English language arts teachers working together, discussing the new language arts curriculum planning, discussing what road bumps they've had, and helping each other. So we have teacher-based teams often. Increase in research-based intervention programs. So we do also, in addition to what you heard from me when we adopted the English language arts curriculum, we now have approved list based on research and effectiveness with student groups for the kinds of intervention programs that we're using for students. Even in special education, for example, small groups. So we are in the process of collaborating around those, ensuring that our materials are aligned with the very best evidence-based programs available. Many, many are. We have a lot of great things that have already been integrated into those intervention settings that we've already had and we've already been using. So just continuing to monitor those lists and make sure we're training everyone appropriately. And then the structured literacy training, you heard Mr. Liming talk about those stipends that the state agreed to reimburse us for, which is very nice, and we had a great turnout with a lot of teachers getting on that and completing it very early. So that is pertinent to 100% of our classroom teachers, regardless of what you teach. So we're all able to speak the language and support the reading needs of our students. And then we're continuing the peer-to-peer classroom observations that kicked off last year, so we'll have more of that going on. We'll be doing some specific English language arts classroom observations to foster more of that collaboration, not only across grade levels, but maybe across buildings and maybe across districts. We're working on that too. So this is my quote I always have to include, because not everything that counts can be counted, and I know that's true here. Not everything that matters to us as a community of learners is, on this screen tonight, and not everything that is counted counts. So it's feedback to us. The report card is certainly important. We're proud of it, but we know that there are so many things going on that are not measured here, especially in subjects that never get recognized, in terms of student data on a report card. And those are all very important programs that help us raise the kids that you're all raising. So thank you. Any questions?
Unbelievably amazing to be 2 years in a row. Just kudos to everybody, to the absolute entire team, starting from parents getting some kids out of bed maybe at 5:30 in the morning until they're dropped off, and just the whole team is just absolutely amazing.
I don't have any questions, but just comments. Just again, Ms. Gann, thanks for your leadership on this, and the administration also getting it done in the classroom or in the buildings every day, and the classroom teachers getting it done in the classrooms. Again, as we all know, that's where really the rubber hits the road, is in the classrooms. So kudos and thank you to all of those. Again, as the quote there, we do have a quality profile that talks and speaks to beyond just the test scores, all the other great things going on in the school district. And actually that is coming out in the bridge, which should be coming out hopefully by the end of the month. And so the quality profile is in the bridge that will be coming out hopefully by the end of the month or so. And just also comment that the school district during the week of November 11th, we're going to do some celebration within the school district of all the, it's a team effort, not only within the school district, but within the community. So we're going to spend a day highlighting staff, schools, students, family, and community. So that's 5 days. And so of highlighting all of those and just recognizing that it is a team effort among everybody together to have a 5-star school and a 5-star community, but it's a team effort of everybody working with that. So again, thanks to everybody for some fantastic scores, and also beyond that, fantastic learning experiences and environments in our schools.
Thank you all so much. I'm so proud of our schools, from the parents who get the kids out of bed, the teachers and the custodians and administrators, and the kids who actually do their homework. Thank you. That matters.
All right, thank you so much. So we will move on to number 6, open communication. You mind checking? I don't think anybody signed up. Okay. Then we will move into number 7. This is for employment of a new treasurer and CEO. So I'm going to make a motion, and then if we get a second, we can talk about it here in a second. But I'm going to make a motion to recommend approval of an employment contract with Amit Gautam as district CFO and treasurer, commencing January 1st, 2025 through July 31st, 2027 at step 10 MA prorated, and a maximum of 5-day consulting contract through December 31st, 2024, pending satisfactory results of Ohio BCII and or federal FBI background checks.
Second.
All right, so I moved and seconded by Mrs. Dorn. We had a very lengthy application process and interview process, which was honestly fantastic. The consulting service that we used, she let us know that we received more applicants than anybody she had seen in the last 4 years at any other district in the state of Ohio. So that was amazing. Appreciate everybody who went through the process. But here in a second, we're going to be very excited to introduce Mr. Gautam. Mr. Gautam comes to us with a ton of experience, ton of expertise and skills. Served 19 years with the Ohio Auditor of State, and the last 3 years has been the Assistant Treasurer at Dayton Public Schools, managing an office of 20 people and quite a large budget, and I'm sure lots of stories and lots of interesting things going on there. A resident of the district, which is fantastic, a child in our schools. So I think we couldn't be more pleased with the process, but very excited about Mr. Gautam coming to serve with us. How about we do a vote, and then if he wants to, he can maybe say a few words himself. Please call the roll.
Okay, Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
Motion passes. Not to put you on the spot, but is there anything you'd like to share or introduce? Or?
He's ready.
Welcome, sir. We're so happy you're here.
Yeah, you gotta hold the button.
There you go. Yep.
No, thank you. I'd like to thank the board for having faith in me, the superintendent, Dr. Kozad, everyone on the who interviewed me. It was an interesting process. Thanks, Kevin, for working with me. I talked to him yesterday. Looking forward to working with him while we transition. And I'm excited. Being a resident, being a parent, it's excited. And being a community member, I look forward to working with everyone, being part of the administration now. Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome.
Again, welcome. We all of us could not be more excited. So thank you.
All right, great. Again, welcome. Glad to have you on. Glad to have you on board. Moving on to superintendent's report, a new business. So this is a consent agenda of A, B, and C: certificate of license, employment, resignation, leave of absence, supplemental duty. And so that is A, and then B is support staff employment, resignation, leave of absence, and then C is the substitute employment.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Dorn and then Mrs. Anderson.
So again, quite a few supplemental contracts here. Most of them are Camp Kern, and then some other winter supplementals and so forth, and a few stragglers from the fall here, where there's sometimes there's some adjustment of the percents. And then also some employment contracts getting really close to or they're full staff of everywhere, and so that is excellent. And then always some substitutes there, so continuing to build that reservoir of substitutes in the district. That is always very helpful for us.
Do I have any questions? Okay, moved by Mrs. Dorn, seconded by Mrs. Anderson. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Dr. Pryor.
Yes.
Thank you. 9A, other action items, the school calendar for the 25-26 school year. So recommend approval of adjustments to the 25-26 district-wide school calendar to clarify staff and district professional development days.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Dorn and then Mrs. Anderson.
So I just want to make clear, it does not change the calendar of the days that we're in school or not in school. So those are the same. So there's no changes, for parents or for staff with that. It just is clarifying within those professional development days, whether they're a work day or half a work day or professional development day. So again, there's no change to the school or non-school days with next year's calendar.
Please call the vote.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you. And B, out-of-state travel. So recommend approve out-of-state travel for the following high school student activities. We have high school baseball and softball, high school winter guard. And those two are in spring break, high school winter guard in February, and then also in March.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Anderson, then Dr. Pryor.
Again, these are all typical trips that happen on an annual basis.
Questions? Please call vote.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Donations, to recommend acceptance of donation with gratitude from Northmont City Schools for My Geodes student module booklets. Science of Reading, kindergarten, 728 books, grade 1, 1,058, and grade 2, 624.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Dorn, then Mrs. Anderson. That's great.
They just gave us a bunch of books. Like,
So they shifted to a different curriculum
Okay.
with, Science of Reading and mandates, and so they went to a different curriculum that had a bunch of books that came with the curriculum.
nice.
So
Score.
we gave some books here and then to Northbridge also.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey.
Yes. Thank you so much. All right, anything else, sir?
Nope.
All right, anybody got any last parting words for discussion or information?
No, Dr. Cruz, I wanted to thank you about the movement. Maybe you can share, I think, with everyone and maybe share with Kevin. I don't know if he's heard yet, but we've got a safety improvement happening here at the middle school along the back walkway to Carpenter Creek. And that, would you mind sharing a little bit about?
Sure. So on the side of the building here where where the band room is and so forth, and then all the way out to Carpenter Creek or Carpenter Road, Carpenter Creek out there. So putting in a striped pathway for kids getting out of cars near the band room, and then a striped painted path all the way back to Carpenter Creek. So we have a decent amount of students that are either riding their bike to Carpenter Creek or to Deerfield Estates that are going beyond that. So hopefully that painted path will allow a more safe path for those students riding bikes, and those students are getting out of cars in the morning and the afternoon on the side of the building.
I think historically there weren't a lot of kids going that way, but now all of a sudden there is, and it was kind of
Right.
free for all back there. So I think that'll really help.
Yep, that'll be helpful, definitely.
Anybody have anything else? I will take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Dorn and seconded by Mrs. Anderson. When you're ready, please call the roll.
Okay, Dr. Pryor,
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
I'm really anxious.
So
Yes.
excited.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
and Mr. Price.
Yes.
We're adjourned at 7:43. Thank you for coming, everybody.